my teacher Shinzen has a really nice mathematical formulation because he's a mathematical Buddhist. It's kind of a different branch of Buddhism than most of them. So his equation is pain times resistance equals suffering. And some of you have heard this before from me or maybe from him. But this is like E equals MC squared. This is like the secret to the entire universe, the human universe. This is like human relativity theory. It's just as powerful, because our conventional thinking is that pain equals suffering. If pain equals suffering, that means that basically suffering is mandatory in life. But the Buddha said we could get out of suffering. So, how do you do that? Well, because pain times resistance equals suffering. Well, resistance is non-equanimity. What equanimity is non-resistance. So that means that if we can meet pain with equanimity, then suffering is optional. So, in life, pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. There's always going to be pain. We're all going to get sick. We're all going to die. We're all going to get injured periodically. Bad things are going to happen to people that we love. Bad things are going to happen to us. That's not pessimistic. That's just reality. So that's all pain, and it gets randomly distributed, and then sometimes we create it too. But the suffering part is completely optional because it's our resistance to the pain that causes the suffering. And all equanimity really is non-resistance. We're just allowing pain to arise as a phenomena. We're fully experiencing it, and then, like everything else, it's impermanent and it goes away. It changes, either in moment to moment or over long periods of time, or both. So equanimity is like a super important skill set to develop. And there's two aspects to equanimity. This is a huge topic. In the next class, which I think you guys all got the email on, which I called stress, because stress is the new word for dukkha. That the traditional translation of dukkha has been suffering. But some really good Pali scholars have actually said that suffering isn't quite the right word, and so we've come up with all these other translations like unsatisfactory or unreliable for dukkha. Unsatisfactory, unreliable. But lately I've been reading some stuff where people are using the word stress, and how we normally use stress is really what dukkha is. So I called the class stress for lack of a better idea. But the whole 4 weeks is going to be about like working with pain, working with stress, working with discomfort, working with what we don't want, what we don't like, what we didn't ask for, and would just as soon get rid of. Whether it's physical, emotional, internal, external, or whatever. But the key to it is equanimity, because if pain times resistance equals suffering, then pain times equanimity equals purification, which is very different than suffering. Purification is actually what we all want. Nobody wants to suffer. But what we're after is purification. What we're after is freeing ourselves of the mind states and the mental and emotional habits that cause us stress, cause us pain, because we continually recreate it. And purification is freeing our minds of that tendency, so that our tendencies are, when bad things happen, we feel more and more like the Dalai Lama. He's like the poster child of equanimity. Our modern day poster child of equanimity. You know? I mean, think about it. Lost their country, completely oppressed, culture, people, annihilated by the Chinese. He carries all that. He's the spiritual and political leader of the Tibetan people. He lives in exile, right? How does he carry himself? How does he look? He's a happy camper, isn't he? He's like a total sweetheart. He's brilliant. He's powerful. And he's giggly. Even when he's faced with really bad stuff, he's still giggly. It doesn't mean he's in denial. He's seriously not in denial. He's something else. He has very, 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 very deep equanimity. Very, very deep practice. He meditates like 4 hours every morning before he does his life. And he's not a beginner. You know, it's not like, oh, I don't need to meditate anymore. He's not like that. It's like he's meditating for 4 hours in the morning so that he can keep that equanimity through the day because of how intense what he has to hold is. And he's showing us like a different way to be with it. Pain times resistance equals suffering. Pain times equanimity equals purification. And he's holding that equation. He's demonstrating that equation. He's not suffering. He's holding a lot of pain, but he's not suffering. He's holding the pain of his whole civilization. The Tibetan people. But he's not suffering. But he's not in denial. He's not angry. He's completely present with it. He does what he can. And he accepts what he can't do. So that's a big piece of equanimity, is that to have compassion for people who are suffering, which means we have to feel it, right? When we talked about compassion, it's like we feel the suffering and then we want to help. The two parts of compassion, where we feel the pain and then we want to help. But because of the constraints that we all have as human beings, because we're not God, we're not in charge of the world, we don't have all power, we don't have all knowing, the amount of stuff that we can feel and be aware of is this big, and then the amount of it that we can actually do something about is like 0.00001%. It's like this big, realistically. So the tendency is to shut down. The tendency is to shut down, is to not care, to not want to know, to want to say, oh, I can't, there's all this pain in the world, and I can't deal with it. So we just shut down. Well, that's resistance. And the impact of that is that we're less alive, we're less present, we're less engaged, we're less here. Which isn't, not a good result. So equanimity is the ability that undergirds our compassion. The more equanimity we have, the more we can stay open, the more we can feel. It gives us the power to feel suffering without getting dragged into it. To feel pain without getting dragged into it. So equanimity is not caring. It's not identifying with caring. It's not denying or resisting or pushing away caring, but it's not getting identified, it's not getting fixated. So that we can stay happy internally in the face of immense pain and suffering in the world, and still care and still be engaged and not be in denial. That's why, that guy can giggle about almost everything when he's holding all this pain. But it doesn't seem weird. It doesn't, it's like he's doing something different with it. He's doing something different with it. And it takes practice. It takes obviously a lot of practice to develop this deep equanimity, this deep understanding that, like the ego, our human ego, and I don't usually use that word, but it fits here so well, that we all have this sort of delusion that we're the center of the universe, right? The egoic delusion, like that we're the center of the universe. Well, that means that, I should do something about it. It's like here's a problem, I should solve it. Here's suffering. And because we can't, then we don't want to feel it. We just want to shut down. Because we feel like responsible in some way. When we meet suffering outside of us, that we have to do something. We should be able to change it. That compassion impulse. But we can't. So then how do we stay open in the face of that? How do we just feel the suffering out here and not take it on? Well, that's equanimity. So it lets us stay open, it lets us stay connected in the face of infinite pain, infinite suffering. I mean, we're just one life, we have our own problems. But you read the newspaper and get on the internet and there's billions of people. That's a lot of suffering. It's overwhelming. It's like, how do you deal with that, I mean, just drive around Boulder and look at all the homeless people. A lot more than just one. So the suffering, it's like outnumbers us. And it's very, very hard to stay open to that. So we disconnect. And this practice is about connection. All of these flavors of love are about connection. Connection is how we thrive as humans. If you want to measure happiness, it's all in terms of connection. Human happiness it's all about connection. It's all about love. It's all about, not feeling separate, not feeling alone. But when we start to open up and we want to connect, we tend to just want to connect to the good stuff. I mean, duh, why not? Of course we do. But a lot of what's out here isn't the good stuff, and so we have to learn how to connect to that. And that's compassion. But we have to have a fair amount of equanimity to manifest that compassion, because otherwise we crumble. How do you care about a world that's in so much pain when you can't really change it? You can only do 0.00001% or whatever that actually is. I mean, even the people with a ton of money who want to change it, it's like it's so hard. Like, look at Bill and Melinda Gates. They're trying to give away like $30 billion to change all of these major problems in the world. With that amount of money and that amount of effort and how smart they are and they're well-intentioned, who knows if it'll work or not? So maybe they'll end polio. Maybe they'll even end malaria. So then dengue fever will take over from malaria. It's like, the biological world isn't just going to go away because Bill Gates has $50 billion to throw at it. The microbes are evolving just as fast as we can. So it's like, even with that amount of wealth and intention, they're not going to end pain. They're not going to end suffering. They're not going to end disease. They're just, it can't be done. So equanimity leaves us with the ability to stay open even when we can't do what we wish that we could do if we were in charge of the universe. Because we're not in charge of the universe. It's just doing its thing. And we can do what we can. And the Serenity Prayer? Does anybody know it by heart? You want to say it?
The serenity to change the things I can, to something the things I can't, and the wisdom to know the difference.
Right.
It's always that middle one.
Yeah. It's actually, give me the strength
to change
the things I can, or the courage to change the thing, and then the something to...
What is that?
God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change,
That's it.
the courage to change the things I can.
That's it.
And the wisdom
to
Thank
to
you.
know
know
the
the
difference.
difference.
Beautiful. Okay. So that could be called the equanimity prayer. You know, that's, I mean, every spiritual tradition that is really one works with equanimity. They may not use that word, but they work with it, you know. So that's like, you know, an example of one brand of Christianity. I think it came from a German guy, or
Yeah.
I think so.
you know, probably a Lutheran or a Protestant. But, you know, that's it. The courage to do what I can, the acceptance to know that I can't do everything, what I can't do, and the wisdom to know the difference. Wisdom, you know, that takes wisdom. It's not just simple. It's deep to know that difference. That's equanimity. So we're completely okay with, okay, this is what I can do, this is what I can't do. And I'm not feeling guilty, and I'm not feeling overwhelmed, and I'm not feeling bummed out, and I'm not feeling a victim. And all the things that we do with when we're faced with a lot of pain, and then we shut down. So this is undergirding. This is our strength to stay open, regardless of what's happening. No matter how bad it gets or how good it gets. Because when things get really good, we tend to get giddy and complacent. And, you know, that's not equanimity either. We tend to get really attached to it, and then we start getting grippy, and then it goes away, and we freak out. What did I do wrong? You know, why did that good thing stop? What did I do wrong? I didn't do anything wrong. Everything changes. So that's equanimity that gives us, okay, that was great, now it's gone. What's next? And this, you know, this is about ourselves, and this is about others, and this is about the world. Developing equanimity about all of that. So it doesn't mean that we don't care. It doesn't mean that we don't do what we can do. It just means that we stay open. We're not repressing anything or avoiding anything, and we're not getting identified either. You know, if you look at, is anybody here a psychologist? Okay, so, you know, if you look at all of the different kinds of neuroses that exist, I mean, there's like thousands now. You know, everything is a new psychological disease. They're really, you can kind of divide them into two categories pretty easily. Okay, there's all the repression and denial and avoidance, and then there's all the identification and fixation. So stuff comes up, you know, pain comes up, weird stuff comes up inside of our psyches, our minds. And one strategy is to repress it, deny it, avoid it, push it away, don't deal with it. Okay, and then there's a whole different taxonomy of those. And the other way is that we get overwhelmed because we get identified and fixated. Like that's who I am, that's what I am. That becomes our whole reality, and we get subsumed by it. And there's a whole taxonomy of those. But if we can just stay with it, okay, this is what's happening, this is what's arising, I realize it's impermanent, I realize it's not me, it's just happening, and I'm not resisting it, I'm completely present with it. That's equanimity. That's the true mature human. That's the true adult human. That's complete psychological and emotional health. Does that make sense? It's simple, right? It's not easy, but it's simple. Definitely not easy. Okay? It's a lifetime of learning to do this. So how do we learn it? Well, this is really the one interesting thing about equanimity is that it can start anywhere. So where we start to build equanimity is to realize that we don't have it, and to be okay with that. Because that's where we start. Here we are. Oh, I'm freaking out. I don't have any equanimity about this. And rather than getting identified with that, oh my God, I'm freaking out, I don't have any equanimity, it's just to matter-of-factly, oh, this is what non-equanimity feels like. I'm causing suffering. And that moment is equanimity about not having equanimity. And that's where it can start. It can start at any moment. In other words, we don't have to change anything. We just have to become okay with where we are. Oh, this is non-equanimity. This is causing suffering. This is where I am. I'm creating my own suffering right now by resisting this experience. That's what non-equanimity feels like. And that, if you can feel the energy in that, it's full of equanimity. Equanimity at not having it. And that's how it starts. It's very cool irony. It's magic. It's like it's total magic. That if you can catch yourself freaking out and just go, oh, I'm freaking out. That in that moment, it's like, oh, that's the beginning of equanimity. And last week I talked about karma, how we create. So, this is really interesting because we have free will and we don't. Okay? So, right now we're all set up so that if the right trigger happened, we would all freak out and react. Right? I mean, that's, we all know. If you do this to me right now, I will freak out. I've got mine, you've got yours. Okay, so that's all conditioning, right? That's where we are. So a certain amount of stimulus, some of you in here, let's say all of a sudden the smoke alarms went off in my house. They're really loud. They're so annoying. Some of us might be, whatever, I've heard that before. And some people might get like, turn that off. And some people might get really freaked out, like, oh my God, there's a fire, and they'd be running out the door. We'd all react differently to a different stimulus. Some would have more equanimity and some would have less. But we all have our triggers, okay? Now, the amount of free will that we have over those triggers in the moment when they happen, unplanned, spontaneously, right? Somebody cuts you off in traffic. Somebody calls you up and tells you that they, something really bad happened to somebody that you care about. The amount of equanimity we have in that moment, we have very, very, very little free will over. Right? Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. You can all look at our lives and see that that's true. Okay? So, do we have free will over that? Very, very, very little. It's mostly conditioned. Okay? But the amount of equanimity that you have over that same experience in a year, you have a lot of free will over. In other words, if you take the next year to work on this, you could dramatically change how much reactivity versus how much equanimity you would have over the things that trigger you. So, building this is a process over time. It's a long-term project. We don't really have that much free will to change this moment. But what we do have free will over is to change the moments in the future by changing how we react, changing how we respond. That's what we call practice. That's what spiritual practice is we're building a better future for ourselves by working today to become aware of things so that they naturally evolve and heal and progress so that tomorrow we're different. It's like a garden. It's like, the way we approach our psychological changes, we kind of go, oh, I want this to be different. And then it doesn't work. It'd be like going out in your backyard and going, I want a garden. It's not working. There's no garden. It's like, I want a garden. And then so we, the next thing we do is we go to the grocery store, we buy a bunch of vegetables and put them in the yard. Like, that's not a garden. In other words, we try really hard to improve, right? I'm going to be different. It's like buying vegetables and throwing them in the yard. Oh yeah, there's my garden. And a week later, they've all been eaten by the animals or rotten. There's no garden. What do you need to do to have a garden? Well, you can't just have a garden. It just doesn't work that way. You got to get out a shovel or a rototiller and dig up the grass and pull it away, and then you got to dig up the earth, and then you got to amend the soil and improve the soil organically or otherwise. Then you got to plant it, you got to water it, you got to weed it, you got to keep the animals out of it. And then in the first year, you get a harvest. And then if you keep doing it 3, 4, 5 years later, you have a really nice garden, right? Because it takes years to build the soil. So it's the same thing with building equanimity or building mindfulness or building metta. This is a project. We don't have the free will. We can't just, let there be a garden. Like little gods, Like, I want to be different. Yeah, we all want to be different. But are you willing to do the work? Put in the time. Put in the effort. We're not just buying vegetables and throwing them on the ground in the yard. So equanimity is like this. So we have free will to create more equanimity in the future. That's karma. Karma is the intention of our actions, that all actions have results. So with the intention and the continuous monitoring of it, the continuous noticing, now I'm being reactive. Now I've got some equanimity. That's reactivity. That's equanimity. And then we build equanimity by observing non-equanimity. Mm-hmm. And we're naturally going through cycles of more or less equanimity. So on some days something happens and it's like a total freak out. And then you might notice, like, other days that happens, it's no big deal. You notice that? Sometimes really intense stuff happens. It's like, okay, And other times little stuff happens and we go off the deep end. We get like really depressed or angry or reactive or guilty or whatever over something that isn't that big. And then on other times, like, something will happen. It's like, okay, that happened. What do I need to do to fix it? Or who do I need to apologize to? So equanimity goes up and down all on its own. So part of building it is noticing those cycles. Becoming more and more aware of, this is when it's higher and it feels good. And this is when it's lower and it doesn't feel so good. Not as a way of blaming ourselves or beating ourselves. This isn't like a new tool for feeling like a failure. But being mindfully aware of it gives our brain something to learn from. Because it's sort of randomly creating more or less of this. And if we're not aware of it, then it doesn't know any better. It just keeps randomly creating more or less. But if we're paying attention to when it creates more and when it creates less, then it starts to go, oh, that felt good. I should do that more often. Oh, that doesn't feel as good. Maybe I don't want to do that as often. And just that intention, just that awareness allows us to build more and more of this sort of matter-of-factness about the ups and downs that happen. Matter-of-factness. I was trying to do something on the internet today, and then I was on the phone. So, it was this thing that I was trying to get done, and it involved looking online and then talking to somebody on the phone about what I was doing. And at one point, Comcast just went out. So I lost the phone and the internet all at once. And I'm in the middle of this process. So it's like, okay. So I have to get out my cell phone, call Comcast, find out what's going on, and then get on my cell phone and call the person that I was dealing with and tell them that I couldn't do it on the internet, and they had to explain the whole thing to me on the phone. And I just noticed, for whatever reason, I was laughing about it with them. And it was like I wasn't reactive. I just didn't get reactive. It was like there was a fair amount of equanimity, probably because I talked about equanimity this morning, So it was pretty cool. On another day, if I'd been like, I would have been like, "Ugh," and it was like, and then at the end of the thing, then right towards the end of the whole procedure, then the internet came back. And then so the women sent me the email with the link, but the link didn't work. It was like nothing's working.
Mercury is retrograde.
Yeah, and it was like, and she's like, that's never happened before. It's like, there was like, she sent me the link, and she goes, well, it's working on my end. I sent it to myself, and I'm like, well, I can't get it to work. And then at the end of the whole thing, she goes, she was really sweet. She was like, well, thanks for not getting mad at me. I was like, yeah, it was fine, But it just naturally, like, there wasn't any real irritation in me. I wasn't resisting the process, and I wasn't suffering from it, even though it was painful. I mean, it was painful. But I didn't get into why me and these people and this computer and Comcast. I hate them all. Just like, I mean, and I'm not claiming that that's how I am all the time. I mean, if it had happened on a different day in a different moment, I would have started to get like, this isn't fair. Or, I hate these people. I hate Comcast. I mean, I don't really like Comcast, but they're a fact of life. I'm not a big fan, but they're a fact of life, So, but it was just noticing that, there was a fair amount of equanimity. And again, probably because causes and conditions, because I had talked about it this morning to the other group. And so just paying attention to it, talking about it, thinking about it, observing it, you get more of it. It's free. Like the mind just learns how to naturally create it if we pay attention to it. Because if you try to force it, guess what? Is that equanimity? Is trying to force equanimity? It's not, right? It's the opposite. It's non-equanimity. I need to have more equanimity. I don't have enough. That's not equanimity. The irony is, what is equanimity is, I don't have a lot of equanimity. That's very equanimous to say that. To say, I need more, that's not equanimous. So by simply being open to and accepting our lack of it, we've got it. It's magic. It's like total magic. It's really cool.
Some people might say, well, that means you don't really care.
Right, but you do care. This is all about caring. This is all about caring. The Dalai Lama cares about the Tibetan people. Big time. But he's not suffering.
And he's not angry.
He's just learning and doing what he can.
I suppose that's really mysterious to a great many American people.
Yeah. But hopefully it doesn't stay totally mysterious to us, because we can feel it and play with it and learn it over some period of time, how we can shift this in ourselves and our own reactivity. Just by noticing that it's there or it's not there. It's all you have to do is just notice. One way of doing it is like, you can kind of like, okay, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much equanimity is there with this experience? It's very matter of fact. It's pretty cool right now. It's 10. Or, I'm about to kill somebody. It's a 0.
But I didn't. That's a 1.
Right.
Thought about it.
Right. But, and then you notice. But by noticing it, just by noticing it, it goes up. Just by noticing that, I've only got about a 3 on equanimity in this right now. I'm kind of triggered. Just by noticing that, it'll go up to 4. It's magic. But you try it, okay? You try it. This is real life. I mean, I'm going to teach you the official formal Brahma-Vihara meditation practice for equanimity too. But this is more like real life equanimity too. There's 2 ways to build it. So one is by practicing it formally. And then the other is by noticing it when we get triggered or when we feel super calm. Noticing it when it's not there and noticing it when it's there and just appreciating it when it's there. And when it's not there, just being matter of fact about it not being there, and then that is it. Instead of getting identified with how reactive we are, we just notice, oh, I'm being reactive. Until you could be like your best friend, oh, you don't need to be that, it's like, but not condemning it, not judging ourselves. This is not another reason to get down on ourselves. That's not at all it. None of these Brahma Viharas are. They're all about love and connection and openness and acceptance. None of them are new ways to beat ourselves. Oh, I'm not loving enough. I'm not compassionate enough. I'm not happy enough. I'm really bad at equanimity. Yeah, if you do that, just laugh at yourself. Just laugh at yourself. If you find yourself doing that, just laugh. Laughter is a really good way to develop equanimity. So the formal practice, any questions this far before I do the formal? Any questions about any of this so far? So I know I've said a lot. Guys are full of questions tonight. So there are some equanimity statements. That we can just, do as we've done all these other practices with statements and visualization and feeling. So the first one is very, very simple. May I accept things as they are? Pretty basic, right? May I accept things as they are. And then you can direct it towards yourself, towards somebody in particular, towards all beings. May I accept things as they are for you. May I accept things as they are for the Tibetans, for myself, blah, blah, blah. For my foot. Whatever fits. And then the second one is a little bit more traditional. And it uses the K word. All beings are the heirs of their karma. Their happiness or unhappiness depends on their actions, not on my wishes for them. So all beings are the heirs of their karma. So this is what I was talking about, that right now our level of reactivity or non-reactivity is pretty much determined, right? We can't change it in this moment because we're the heirs of our karma. We're the heirs of all the reactivity or non-reactivity that we've done all our lives. So that's created this momentum, this habit, so that if the smoke alarm goes off, the reaction that we're going to have, our nervous system, our mind, our thoughts, our bodies, is pretty much predetermined. That reaction in this moment, that's that we are the heirs of our karma. Everybody is. It doesn't mean that the reaction that we have in a year to that same stimulus is totally predetermined. It's not. It's very much undetermined. We could change it. But the reaction we have right now is mostly predetermined. All beings are the heirs of their karma. You understand karma? It's just habit. It's the result of all of our thoughts and all of our actions. So their happiness or unhappiness depends on their actions, not on my wishes for them. we wish metta, compassion, sympathetic joy, forgiveness. Our wishes are good. We wish everybody the best. It doesn't mean that that's what's going to happen. Their happiness or unhappiness depends on their actions. And to a certain degree on randomness. I mean, this is where, and you can add that in there if you want. But it certainly doesn't depend on our wishes for them. It depends on their actions and also on a certain degree just on randomness, if you want to look at it that way. So, we have our wishes. All of the other preceding Brahma Viharas include those wishes, right? That's what we've been practicing, our wishes for other people's happiness and our own happiness. But it isn't enough. And we just realize that. And then we accept that. And we practice that. My wishes for myself aren't enough. I have to take action. I have to actually go out and plant the garden, prepare the soil, water it, weed it, tend it, harvest it, and then do it again for years to get a really good garden. That's how I create my happiness, not just wishing it. Wishing it is like buying the vegetables and throwing them on the ground. It doesn't work. It's not enough. So does this make sense as a practice? We can do this as a formal practice, just like we've been doing all the other Brahma Viharas. To building our own ability to see this and accept this. And especially if something really intense is happening for ourselves or for somebody else, or something really good is happening and it doesn't feel like compassion or mudita is enough, that we start to feel like we're closing down. It starts to feel like we can't hold it. It's too painful or it's too wonderful. So then we just do equanimity. May I accept things as they are?
I'm having trouble with that one. Not so much the idea of accepting things as they are, but sometimes there'll be things that other people do to themselves or others that are so unbelievable, unspeakably horrible. And I don't know how to accept that.
Well, that's exactly it.
Yeah, that's the beginning.
That's exactly it.
Okay.
We don't know how to. We have to build it over time. Because when we don't know how to accept it, what do you do?
You accept that you can't accept it.
But what do you actually do?
I try to feel compassion for it, knowing that I can't understand it, but still that must have required a great deal of suffering in order to do that action.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of what I've done to this point. And I know I can't change it. It's done. But I don't understand it.
No, and this doesn't require us to understand it.
Yeah.
And it doesn't require us to condone it.
Right.
It only requires us to be with the fact that it is. That's all it is.
Boy, is that hard.
It is.
This feels really hard.
It's a process.
Yeah.
It's a process. Just watching ourselves in our own resistance to, I don't know if I can do that. And then having equanimity with that. Because, the fact is. Okay, so imagine you're in Apollo 13, right? And you're on your way to the moon. You're like 200,000 miles from Earth. And you're in a little capsule. And you're completely dependent on technology. And then there's an explosion. Right? And it's like so cool. Like, you know what they said? The great quote from the movie or from the history. Houston, we have a problem. Just like that. That's you can hear it on the YouTube. The real one, not just the movie. But, Houston, we have a problem. Just like that. It's like, that's training. That is like, that is like absolute Dalai Lama-like training of the astronauts. That they can have that much equanimity that, their spaceship has an explosion and they're like on their way to the moon.
They had really good drugs, I think.
And it's just, Houston, we have a problem.
This reminds me of a funny story about him and myself. He was driving in Romania, where traffic is pretty crazy. And at a certain point, we found ourselves driving against the traffic. Like, traffic was coming at us, and all he said was, "Houston, we've got to go."
Yeah, it's a great line, right? Because it's so full of equanimity. It's just, okay, it's a matter of fact, no denial, but no identification. It's like, and it, it's like that, that's what that's a lot of what the astronaut training is, this building equanimity so that they can actually deal with whatever they have to deal with. So, yeah, it's difficult and it takes time, but we can do it. So let's try it. Yeah.
Their happiness or unhappiness depends on their actions, not on my wishes for them. Nevertheless, it's a good thing to wish for them, because we've been doing that in it.
Yeah. Good. Oh, yeah. This doesn't negate any of the...
But why?
Well,
it doesn't do a thing for them.
Well, it may or may not do anything for them. Okay? That's one of the mysteries here. Okay? And I know I talked about this a little bit on the very first week of, when we talked about metta, that, we don't know if this has any objective effect in the world. There have been some interesting studies done about people who are prayed for in the hospital, and, maybe they have slightly better outcomes. Maybe there is some objective energy that gets transferred from our wish doing metta practice. If there is, it's just gravy. It's just, it's absolute bonus gravy. That's not why we're doing it. We're doing it because it opens up this heart and makes us feel better. And then everybody we come into contact with, directly or indirectly, is affected by that for sure. Okay. So we're happier. Yeah. And then everybody we interact with is happier. Like the women I was on the phone with, Like, she probably thought it was a pretty cool interaction considering nothing was going right. Because I wasn't mad at her. So it absolutely has huge effects on our own heart and mind, and then on all of the interactions we have with people, directly and indirectly, for sure. And then actually research has shown that it actually gets spread, so that it gets spread to one more degree for sure. So if if I come up to Sam and I'm really nice to Sam and we have a good interaction, then the next person she interacts with, she's going to be nice to them, and then they're going to be nice in turn. So it starts to spread that way. And if I come up to Sam and I'm all snarly, and then she's going to have to snarl at the next person, or her dog or whatever, because that's how we are, And so it has these effects, whether or not it does while we're doing the formal practice.
Well, I can feel it while I'm doing it.
Yeah,
but
you can feel it. Yeah, for you,
yeah,
right.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if while you're doing the formal practice, whether it objectively affects the people you're sending metta to. It very well may. But we don't have to believe that or know that, because it has such huge effects on us, and then on all of our interactions, which then affect the people that those people interact with. And so over the course of your life, it's affecting millions of people maybe.
And then if our heart's open and we become kinder, more decent people, more awake to some degree, that becomes part of our karma as well.
Exactly.
So that's something that whatever that turns into later is a help to some of the not so wonderful things.
Yeah. Yeah, we're creating a better future as well as a better present. Because there is really no future. There's only the present. It's just more and more of it.
Oh, Lord.
So, any of these phrases or ways of doing this towards yourself, towards anybody in particular, towards the whole world, whatever aspect of this you think would be most useful or most interesting, we'll practice now for a while together, doing this. And, just like all the other Brahma Vihara practices, this should feel good. It should feel good. We're not like dissing anybody. We're not caring. This is all about connection. This is all about caring. It's love. It's just a different flavor of it. It's actually the highest and most subtle form of love, the most powerful form of love. There's no doubt that the Dalai Lama is full of love. There's no doubt that he loves the Tibetan people. But he also loves the Chinese.
He loves everybody.
Right. That's equanimity.
It's kind of like that hologram you talked about. If there's any one person in the world you just can't stand, that's going to make your whole hologram a little bit fuzzy, right?
That's right. Exactly.
Yeah.
So this is all about that non-reactivity, that okayness with all of it. The good, the bad, and the ugly.
I don't quite understand why you put that bottom part on. Like, so what? All beings are the heirs of their karma, their happiness or unhappiness. So what? I mean, I don't quite know how that follows from the first. I guess that's what I'm wondering.
Their happiness or unhappiness depends on their actions.
Yeah, why does that follow from, may I accept things as they are?
Oh. No, they're two separate statements.
Oh, just totally different things we could think about.
Yeah, they're two different ways of doing the same practice.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So this is one, and then this is another.
Okay.
So I wouldn't glom it all together. It's too many words. So you can use either of those or make up something else that sort of inclines you in this direction.
So I guess that second one inclines you against feeling guilty.
Yeah. Feeling guilty, feeling responsible, feeling like you're not doing enough, feeling like you're, useless, feeling like the world sucks.
Which is all contrary to acceptance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is also about judgment, which I suppose we'll hear more about in Vipassana practices. I do a lot of it.
Well, in the scale of in the progress of insight and awakening, judgment is the last thing to go.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Ugh.
That's what I've been told.
Wow.
Yeah. And also, like, wisdom is judgment. It's just wise discernment.
Yeah.
But wisdom, that's why judgment is the last to go, because it is so closely tied to wisdom to actually tease out the wise part of it from the harmful part of it is incredibly, incredibly subtle. The mind can't afford to let go of judgment without letting go of wisdom.
Good point.
So it has to hold on to judgment until it's so refined that it can let go of the judgment and without the wisdom.
It's probably biologically true, too.
Yeah. Yeah, because we wouldn't have evolved if we didn't have, as I've said many times, we evolved to survive, not to be happy. And all of that judgment that we do, which even though it makes us miserable and hard on each other and ourselves, it's super useful for evolution and survival. It's super useful. So let's do equanimity. Any questions on how to do it? Everybody have a strategy in mind for what you're going to do? You want to say the phrases to yourself. You want to visualize things that corroborate or reinforce the phrases. And you want to feel any sense of equanimity that's there or non-equanimity that's there without judging it. Just notice, oh, that's what equanimity feels like, or that's what non-equanimity feels like. Don't go, oh, I have to have more equanimity, I'm not doing it right. Just go, oh, I'm feeling reactive, I'm feeling guilty, I'm feeling this. That's not equanimity. And then you can have equanimity with the lack of equanimity. And then enjoy that. Enjoy the equanimity.